G'day and welcome to Disc Golf Down Under. It's Matt here. With the new year comes changes to the rules of disc golf, and in 2022 the PDGA have made a number of significant changes to the rules. These came into effect on the 1st of January 2022, and in this video I'm going to cover the top 10 disc golf rule changes that I think you need to know for 2022. So let's dive in. Now, at the beginning of each year, the Professional Disc Golfers Association, or PDGA, review the rules of disc golf and sometimes make changes. In some years, the changes are very minor, but this year there were more than usual, with around 26 individual changes made. Now, some of these changes don't necessarily change how the rule works, with some words being changed or sections rewritten to make the rules easier to understand and clearer to interpret. So, of the 26 changes this year, I'd put 9 into this category of clarification. A good example of this is the complete rewriting of Rule 813 on equipment, which covers illegal discs and illegal devices. There's no substantive change to the rules, but hopefully it's now clearer for players to read and understand. Of the remaining 17 changes made in 2022, I'd say half of these are fairly minor and the other half are significant and important for players to know. Many of these changes are about removing loopholes that players could sometimes use to gain an advantage, and some are about taking the burden of decision off the playing group. In other words, more black and white rules and less shades of grey. Now, in this video, I'm going to cover the top 10 main changes that I think you need to know, and I'm assuming you already have a good grasp on the rules. If you're new to disc golf and you're still struggling with the rules, I recommend you jump on the PDGA website and have a read through the current rules. I'll leave a link in the video description down below so you can find them easily. Also, the PDGA just released a 12-part video series covering the basic rules of disc golf. You can find video 1 in the series in the card up above, and I'll also leave a link in the video description down below. So, with that out of the way, let's jump into my top 10. Now, at the end of any competition round, you need to return your scorecard, and that's within 30 minutes. Rule 808 Part F previously stated that this 30 minutes started after the last group on the course has finished the final hole and has had reasonable time to turn in their scorecard. The problem with this is, what is reasonable time? Enough time for the group to return to the clubhouse, have a toilet stop, buy some food on the way, maybe return their gear to the car, etc. Also, for groups playing tee times earlier in the morning, it might mean that they don't have to turn in their card until many hours after they're finished. So the rule has now been updated so that your 30 minutes starts from when your group finishes their round. That's when your disc, or the last disc, lands in the basket. The penalty for breaking this rule remains unchanged and is still 2 shots for each player's scorecard that is returned late. So if there's 4 players on one scorecard, they all lose 2 strokes for a late scorecard. Next, it's always been against the rules for a player or their equipment, such as their bag, to interfere with their own throw. Makes sense, right? Now, under the old rules, Rule 810 Part E covers intentional interference. That is, altering the course of a thrown disc, whether this be your own disc or someone else. Violation of this rule incurred a 2-shot penalty, and the next throw is taken from the point where interference occurred. Following on from this, Rule 810 Part F covers specifically interference with your own throw. Violation of this rule incurs a 1-shot penalty, and the next throw is taken from where the disc comes to rest. Now, this was a very grey rule, and it could be difficult to determine which rule to enforce. For example, a player putts to an uphill basket, the disc misses and rolls back down the hill. The player holds their stance and the disc runs over their foot before coming to rest a few more metres down the hill from where they touched it. So, do they get a 1-shot penalty or a 2-shot penalty? And do they play their next shot from where they touched the disc or where it came to rest? So with the rule change in 2022, the old Part F of this rule has been removed and replaced with a new rule that they've inserted at Part D. And this new rule is a lot more straightforward and says that if a player or their equipment interferes with the course of their own throw, whether it be intentional or not, the throw is disregarded and the player is penalised 2 shots. And they'll be throwing their next shot from the same lie. This is a much tougher penalty than before and much easier to enforce. There have been 3 changes to the rules regarding obstacles. Firstly, there's a significant change to Rule 803.02 Part B. Previously, if you were unable to take a legal stance because of a large, solid obstacle, you could place your marker behind the obstacle and on the line of play. Now this was applicable, for example, if your disc was inside a tree trunk. You could mark your lie behind the tree on the line of play. Now, the words "a large solid obstacle prevents the player from taking a legal stance" has been replaced by the words "an obstacle physically prevents the player from taking a legal stance." So this now allows a player to take relief without penalty from obstacles such as thick bushes, hedges and the like. And because of this change in the wording, the word motor vehicle has been removed from Rule 803.02 Part A as well, because it's redundant. If you can't take a legal stance because of a motor vehicle, you can take relief. Finally, event directors now have more flexibility on providing relief from obstacles. Rather than sticking to the standard on the line of play, farther from the target at the nearest point of relief, they can, if they want, use drop zones or perhaps lateral relief. Previously, Rule 802.06 Part D stated that marking the lie incorrectly would be a marking violation. The wording of this rule has been changed slightly so that it is now a violation if the player throws from an incorrect lie. So if you mark your lie incorrectly, you have up until the point at which you make your throw to fix your mistake. And another addition to the rules can be found under 802.07 Part B that states a drop zone can now be played as a marked lie in addition to previously playing it as a teeing area. This gives TDs more flexibility and they can mark a drop zone by a spot on the ground which defines the lie for the next shot. Next, 2 significant changes have been made to the excessive time rule, which is 802.03. Firstly, Part A of this rule gives the player 30 seconds to take their throw. The 4th condition of this rule was that the playing area is clear and free of distraction. The problem with this rule is, what is a distraction? Any player who wants more time can swat at imaginary flies, complain about noises from a group 3 holes away, or say that the wind is blowing my hair in my eyes, etc, etc. You get the idea. So the words "free of distraction" have been removed and this loophole is no more. If the playing area is clear, the 30-second shot clock starts ticking and you have to deal with any distractions best you can. Secondly, disc golf rounds can last for hours and there's never been anything in the rule book to allow time for a toilet or bathroom break. But now in 2022 we have the addition of Part C under Rule 802.03 that gives the player the chance to request extra time to take a bathroom break. However, if the player doesn't return in a reasonable time, they will miss the hole and receive par +4 for the hole. There's been a number of changes made to Rule 811 Part F, and that's covering types of misplay. Some of them are just a rewording of the rules to make them clearer, and other changes are quite significant. I'll cover the first major change here at number 5 and follow up with the other one at number 4. So under the previous rules, if you started play on the wrong hole or in the wrong group to which you were assigned, you could be penalised 2 shots, but then continue playing the course without penalty. However, people could take advantage of this rule. For example, a player turns up at the course a minute before play is due to start and they've been assigned to a group starting on the other side of the course. And that might be a 10-minute walk away. So do they run across the course, meet up with their assigned group on the second hole and start with a par +4 penalty for the first hole? Or do they join another group close by and take a 2-shot penalty instead? Under the new rules, subsection 9 covering starting on the wrong hole or the wrong group has been deleted and replaced by 2 separate rules. Firstly, a player is not allowed to play with a different group. Full stop. Clear. They must find their assigned group and they will receive penalties for being absent until they join the correct group. Any throws taken with the wrong groups are disregarded. Secondly, and this is a really important one, if a group starts on a hole different to what they were assigned to start on, and one player in the group makes more than one throw, every player in the group will be penalised for misplaying the hole and they each receive a 2-shot penalty. However, if the group realises they're on the wrong hole before any player makes their second throw, only those who've started play out of order will receive a 1-shot penalty. All throws will be disregarded and the group should proceed to the correct starting hole. Okay, so continuing on with the changes to the types of misplay, Section 5 of Rule 811 Part F has been deleted and replaced by 2 new rules. Previously, a player was deemed absent or missing 30 seconds after it's their turn to throw. So at the start of the round, a person 5th on the card might have an extra 2 to 3 minutes for them to arrive late compared to the person listed number 1 on the card. And this has not exactly been fair, and the rule has been changed now so that you are deemed absent at the start of play if you're not present within your assigned group at the designated start time. The player will continue to be deemed absent at the next hole if they're not present when the first person is ready to throw. And the penalty continues to be the same as it was before for an absent player, with par plus 4 strokes for each hole they are deemed absent. The other change to this rule is the inclusion of the bathroom break. So players will not be deemed missing after 30 seconds if they've requested a break and they're allowed a reasonable time. The next rule change is a very sensible one in my opinion. Previously, Rule 807 Part B stated that to complete the hole with a basket, the disc had to enter the target above the top of the tray and below the bottom of the chain support and come to rest supported by the target. Sounds reasonable, but what happens in the case of a blind ace? Hypothetically, the group could argue that they didn't see the disc enter the target between the tray and the chain support and therefore the hole is not complete. Now, as long as your disc comes to rest supported by the chain or the tray, it's counted in, no matter how it got there. So this, of course, is obviously in. So supported by the chains is also in. And it can also come to rest up in the top of the chain supports. It can be balancing on the edge of the tray. It can be supported on 2 nubs. And if you can get it to wedge in the side of the tray as well, that is now also counted as in. Now we're getting to the tail end of our top 10 and some of the more significant rule changes. The rules regarding out of bounds have seen 3 major changes. Previously, if your disc went out of bounds, such as this one here, you could take your next lie from a point where the disc crossed out of bounds and up to 1 metre on a perpendicular line. So this is my 1 metre stick. I put it perpendicular to the line and I can put my marker anywhere along that line. So I can put it here if I like, or I can put it down here. Now, if that was not available and there wasn't any perpendicular angle, let's say there was a tree here, then you're allowed to go up to 1 metre away in a radius from where the disc went out of bounds. But the rule has now changed in 2022, and so you take the point where your disc went out of bounds and you can put your marker anywhere within a 1 metre radius of that point. So we can go up to 1 metre forward, we can go up to 1 metre back. Gives us a lot more room to play with and a lot more flexibility. So if I want to, I can put my marker out there and play my next shot from that location. Also, if you're within 1 metre of a tight corner, such as this one here, you're now allowed to relocate your lie on a 1 metre line that extends from the corner point through the disc. So if my disc is located here, I can't get 1 metre perpendicular on those lines there. So I can put my 1 metre radius in here and I can move my disc anywhere up to within that 1 metre range. So I can relocate my lie to that point there. Gives me a lot more room in that corner. The final change to the OB rules is the addition of Section H, which gives TDs the flexibility to provide relief greater than 1 metre for particular OB areas. For example, previously 2 metres relief was typical for barbed wire. This is now officially part of the rules, and so for example, a TD could, if they wanted, provide 5 metre relief from the OB crocodile pond if they wish. Okay, we've arrived at number 1, and now for the biggest and probably most controversial change to the PDGA rules in 2022. And that's Rule 804, Regulated Routes, which has been completely deleted and replaced with a simpler Rule 804.01, Mandatory Routes and Objects. Now, under the old rules, players had to monitor the disc in flight, determine whether it passed to the correct side of the mandatory object, check where the disc landed, and there were a lot of rules determining the mandatory line on the ground, whether being a perpendicular to a line from the tee or the previous mandatory. Now I know from experience that this could get confusing, and I've seen numerous arguments and complaints about mandos. So under the new rule, which is supposed to be simpler, the mandatory is now to be clearly defined by at least one vertical object. That can be a post, a tree, etc. And the edge must also be clearly defined. No longer is it an imaginary line passing vertical through the centre of the tree. The TD must indicate which parts of the object define the edge of the mando. Is it the main branches on the left, or the right side, the foliage, or some other part of the object? The line on the ground must also be clearly defined by markers, painted lines, etc. And finally, a drop zone must also be marked for each mando. The mandatory is considered as missed if the disc crosses the vertical plane defined by the line on the ground and the vertical object. The penalty for missing the mando remains unchanged with a 1 penalty stroke, and you proceed to the drop zone. If there's no drop zone, you go back to the previous lie or the teeing area. Sounds like the old rule, you might say. However, if you cross the mando, hit a tree and bounce back across the mando line, under the old rules you were fine and you were okay. Under the new rules, you now miss the mando because the disc entered restricted space. Or perhaps you made it through the mando, hit a tree or a branch and then rebounded back across the mando line. And this is also a missed mando, whereas under the old rules it was okay. There's also another important change that I expect many players may miss. And this is not a new rule, but the removal of an old rule, which stated that the next nearest mandatory is considered to be the target for all rules related to lie, stance, relief, etc. So where this change is most significant is on a dogleg hole with a mando like this. Under the old rules, your lie for your next throw was aligned with the mando. Makes sense, as this is where you're aiming your next throw. But with the removal of the old rule, the lie is now defined by the standard rule, which says it is aligned with the target. So on this hole, your lie is now rotated and is no longer aligned with the direction you're throwing. Players will need to be very mindful of this rule change, and if you make a mistake and play the old rule, you may be called for a foot fault. So perhaps it's now a simpler rule, but I can definitely foresee some pain for unlucky players down the track, and it may take a while for players to get used to this one. Okay, there you go. That's my list of top 10 changes to the PDGA rules of disc golf for 2022. Some really important ones to get on top of and understand, including the new mando rule and changes to the OB rule. What do you think of the changes? Are they for the better, or do you prefer the old rule? Let me know in the comments down below. So I hope you got something out of this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you like it and subscribe to the Disc Golf Down Under channel for more disc golf content. I've got some great reviews and giveaways coming up in the next few videos. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.